In the illustrious world of chess, where legends are born and history is written on the 64 squares of the chessboard, the encounter between Magnus Carlsen and Garry Kasparov emerges as a clash of epics. Carlsen, with the precision of a master tactician, initiates the game with d4, a move resonating with the promise of a complex and dynamic middle game. Kasparov's response, d5, mirrors this intent, establishing a symmetrical pawn structure that is a prelude to a titanic struggle for control of the center. Carlsen's second move, c4, known as the Queen's Gambit, challenges Kasparov to engage in a battle of positional understanding. Kasparov, unflinching, replies with c6, steering the game into the realms of the Slav defense as Carlsen develops his knight to f3 and Kasparov counters with nf6. Carlsen's decision to develop his other knight to c3 on move 4, followed by the pinning of Kasparov's knight with g5, adds a tactical layer to the already strategic opening. Kasparov's response with nbd7 and Carlsen's e3 showcase a careful orchestration of piece development, with Kasparov's queen sortie to a5, a subtle yet potent move. The ensuing moves, Carlsen's nd2 and Kasparov's bb4, followed by Carlsen's qc2 and Kasparov's oo, are a dance of strategy and tactics. As the early game concludes with Carlsen's be2 and Kasparov's e5, the board is set for a middle game of epic proportions. Carlsen, continuing his development, adheres to classical principles, placing his king in safety. Kasparov's xd4, a move that opens the e-file and centralizes his queen on b6, adds a dynamic element to the position, challenging Carlsen to respond with precision. The 11th move by Carlsen, nb3, is a subtle yet impactful maneuver. Kasparov, with the calm retreat of qb6, maintains the tension. Carlsen's xd4 on move 12 further clarifies the center. In a display of strategic intent, Carlsen's 13, bxc4 continues to assert pressure in the center. Kasparov's a5 on the 13th move, Carlsen's a4, Kasparov's qc7 is a repositioning that adds layers to the strategic battle, aligning the queen with the king's rook, potentially eyeing the king side. Carlsen's Rey a1, a centralizing move, prepares for e-file operations. Kasparov responds with h6, a move that provides a lift for his king. Carlsen's bh4 is a retreat that keeps the tension alive. Kasparov's bd6, a centralizing move. The game's strategic nature is evident in Carlsen's h3. Kasparov's nb6 on move 18, a maneuver aiming to relocate the knight to more active squares, adds another layer of complexity to the position. Carlsen's bxf6 and Kasparov's nxc4, a series of exchanges that alter the nature of the position, are indicative of the shift in the dynamic of the game. Carlsen's 19th move, ne4, is a central thrust. Kasparov's bh2+, a tactical shot on move 20, temporarily disrupts Carlsen's king safety, forcing kh1, with both grandmasters vying for positional and tactical advantages. The endgame, beginning with Kasparov's 21 no xe4+, marks a pivotal shift in the game's dynamics. This exchange, leading to Carlsen's kh2, results in the simplification of the position. Kasparov's nd6 on move 22, repositioning the knight to a more effective square, indicates his intention to challenge Carlsen's central dominance. Carlsen's be5 showcases strategic acumen. This is countered by Kasparov's nd6, a move that not only reinforces his knight, but also prepares for further central and kingside activity. Carlsen's qc5, an aggressive queen sortie. The ensuing moves see a series of tactical and strategic exchanges, with Carlsen's d5 and nd4, intensifying the battle for central and queenside control. Kasparov's qd7 and nf5, responding to Carlsen's advances, maintain the balance. Carlsen's dxc6, bxc c6, and Kasparov's nxc6 reflect a keen understanding of the endgame nuances. Carlsen's NXC6 and RE8, followed by Kasparov's QE6 and BB7, maintaining the tension and balance of power. Carlsen's ND4 and Kasparov's NXD4, followed by QXD4, are critical exchanges that further simplify the position. The game's complexity escalates with Carlsen's QG4, exchanging queens and transitioning into a pure pawn endgame. Kasparov's strategic QXC4 and HXG4 are pivotal, shifting the focus to pawn structure and king activity. The game enters a phase where every pawn move carries significant weight, and the kings become active participants in the endgame battle. Carlsen's B3 and BC3, followed by Kasparov's F6 and Re1, illustrate the Grandmaster's deep understanding of endgame principles. The strategic placement of pawns and the activity of the bishops are crucial in this phase. The exchange of rooks on move 36 with RXE1 and BD5 marks another significant simplification, further intensifying the kingside and queenside pawn dynamics. The game approaches its climax with Carlsen's RB1 and KG3 and Kasparov's RB8 and Axe B4. These moves, focusing on pawn structure and king safety, highlight the importance of pawn play in the endgame. Carlsen's BXB4 and BC5, countered by Kasparov's BA6 and KG6, demonstrate their prowess in maneuvering pawns and bishops in a limited material scenario. As the game concludes with Carlsen's RH1+ and BC5 and Kasparov's RB2 and RA2, the Grandmasters engage in a delicate dance of king and pawn moves. The final moves, leading to the game's conclusion at move 52, showcase a masterful display of endgame technique and strategic understanding from both players. In this endgame, Carlsen and Kasparov demonstrate why they are considered titans of chess. Their moves reflect a deep understanding of endgame principles, showcasing their abilities to maneuver pawns, activate their kings, and position their bishops effectively. The game's conclusion is a testament to their skill and the enduring beauty of chess, a game where every move tells a story and every endgame is a journey of intellectual discovery. In this monumental encounter between Magnus Carlsen and Garry Kasparov, the chess world witnessed a clash not just of two grandmasters, but of eras and ideologies. Carlsen's modern strategic approaches intertwined with Kasparov's deep-rooted classical tactics, culminating in a draw that speaks volumes about their chess prowess. This game serves as a masterclass in chess strategy, tactical ingenuity, and endgame expertise, inspiring both seasoned players and newcomers to the world of chess.